They say birthdays are supposed to be special. Mine started with a knock, not on the door, on my heart. I waited for a call, a ding on the phone. A happy birthday, Mom. But all I got was silence. And silence on your birthday, when you're 70, feels like a kind of funeral. My name is Geraldine, and this is the story of how my daughters gave me the cruelest gift a mother can receive. Not just betrayal, but abandonment disguised in paradise. I woke up early that morning, the kind of early that only people in their 70s understand. Not rushed, not excited, just awake. The curtains swayed softly. The sky was still the color of cold milk. I made myself tea, set out 2 mugs, force of habit. I sat by the window watching the old elm tree shed what was left of its leaves. I used to plant pinwheels on the lawn this time of year. When the girls were little, they'd spin them and run around laughing, yelling, "Make a wish, Mommy!" 70. It's not a number that scares me. It's just a number that no one remembers. I stared at my phone. 7:42 a.m. Nothing. Not even a text. By 9 a.m., I'd checked the doorbell camera. Maybe they were planning a surprise, a cake delivery, a flower drop-off. But the porch was empty, just a leaf that rolled across the concrete like it was mocking me. I cracked 2 eggs into a pan, cooked them soft just how I like. Toasted rye bread, added strawberry jam, the kind they always hated. The table looked pitiful. I lit a candle anyway. I whispered, "Happy birthday, Jerry." Then I blew it out, alone. I sat down in my recliner, trying not to think too much. The TV was on, but I wasn't really watching. A morning show host was laughing about trending hashtags. I glanced at my phone again. Still nothing. My heart didn't ache the way it used to when they forgot Mother's Day or showed up late to Thanksgiving. It was different now. There was a heaviness behind my eyes, like my body was remembering something my mind wasn't ready to admit. I mattered less and less in their world. At noon, I finally gave in. I checked their social media, not out of jealousy, but out of longing. Maybe they posted something. Maybe they wrote a memory. The first photo hit me like a slap. There they were, both of them, matching swimsuits, tropical drinks in hand, a glittering blue ocean behind them. The caption, "Sisters escape to paradise. No drama, just bliss." No drama? I blinked again. It was posted just 10 minutes ago. They were in Hawaii, together, on my birthday. No call, no message, no "wish you were here." And it wasn't just the picture. It was the laughter in their eyes, the freedom, as if they had unburdened themselves of something or someone, as if I were the weight they'd finally tossed off. I didn't know what hurt more, the silence from them or the realization that I wasn't even a footnote in their celebration. I sat there frozen, fingers trembling, slightly as I zoomed in, the necklace around my eldest daughter's neck. It was mine, a gold chain I kept in the drawer, one I hadn't worn in years but never gave away. And the purse her sister was holding, I recognized the buckle. It was the one I bought last Christmas. Said it was too expensive for myself, but gifted it anyway. The tears came in one long, slow wave. Not loud, not messy, just steady. And still, I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted answers. I wanted to know why, but first, I needed to figure out how 2 grown women with full-time jobs and children of their own had paid for a luxury Hawaii vacation without a second mortgage. And why? My wallet suddenly felt a little emptier. I didn't move from my recliner for a long time. My eyes stayed locked on that photo, like staring at it long enough might explain the betrayal. Like maybe, if I watched closely, one of them would blink and say, "Just kidding, Mom. We're coming to get you." But the only thing that moved was the clock on the wall, ticking into the afternoon like nothing was wrong. Eventually, I reached for my phone. Not to call them. Not yet. I needed to clear my head. I opened my bank app instead. It was instinct. I wasn't even sure why I did it. Maybe to distract myself, maybe to check if my pension had been deposited, maybe just to prove to myself that the world was still in order, that something still made sense. But the world wasn't in order. The screen loaded, and there it was, a string of transactions I didn't recognize. $3,891. Pearl Sky Resort, Maui $1,270. Alani Spa and Wellness, $2,054. Hawaiian Airlines, $940. Island Jeep Rentals. I sat bolt upright. My heart slammed against my ribs. I scrolled further. $178. Beachside Sushi Bar, $89. Swimwear Boutique, $46. Aloha T-shirts and more. It kept going. My monthly balance was nearly wiped out. More than $12,000. Gone. And then it hit me. They hadn't just taken a vacation. They'd taken me with them. My name, my card, my money. I stood up, nearly knocking over the tea on the side table. My legs felt like jelly, but I marched to my kitchen drawer and pulled out my purse. I unzipped every pocket. My debit card, still there. My ID, too. So how? I pulled out the credit card, the one I rarely used, the one with the higher limit, the emergency one, the one I told both girls about last year when I helped pay for a furnace repair at my youngest's house. I hadn't checked that account in months. I rarely logged into it. With shaky fingers, I opened the second bank app. I didn't even need to look at the statement. Right on the dashboard, remaining balance, $242.88, pending charges, $783. I gripped the countertop. My knees buckled, but I didn't sit down. They'd used that card. The one I told them was for emergencies, the one I kept just in case, and they'd treated it like a lottery ticket. I called the credit card company. Immediately, a calm, pleasant-sounding woman answered. "Thank you for calling Wellsworth Bank. How can I help you today?" "My card," I said, my voice cracking. "I think it's been stolen, or used without my consent." She asked for my details, verified the account, then read through the recent transactions. "And these were not made by you, ma'am?" she asked, cautious. "Number, I haven't been out of the state in years. I haven't flown since my husband passed." A pause. "We may need to freeze the card and file a fraud claim. You should also consider reporting this to your local police department, especially if you know who might have used it." The word stung. Did I know who used it? Yes. But saying their names, my daughter's names, in the same breath as fraud made my stomach turn. I whispered, "Can I have a few minutes to think before we proceed?" The representative agreed, noting the account for review. I sat back down and stared out the window. They didn't just forget my birthday. They used me to fund their escape from me. Suddenly, every recent visit rewound in my mind like a bad movie. The time my oldest offered to help "sort out your mail, Mom," and sat at my desk for half an hour. The time my youngest asked if she could check something on my iPad and walked into the kitchen with it unlocked. The day they giggled about girls' trips and said, "Someday we'll just take off to Hawaii, just us." I thought it was harmless chatter. I thought it was just wishful thinking. I thought I raised better. It wasn't just about the money. It was about being used, quietly, confidently, and without a shred of remorse. They knew what they were doing. And worst of all, they thought I wouldn't notice, like I was too old, too fragile, too irrelevant to see what was happening right in front of me. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake with the glow of the phone lighting up my face as I scrolled through more photos. They posted a video that evening, dancing under tiki torches, laughing in slow motion with Mai Tais in hand. The caption read, "We earned this." I whispered into the silence, "Did you?" Because if this is what they think they've earned, then it's time I teach them what consequences look like. I've heard people say that betrayal doesn't always come with a bang. Sometimes it's in the form of a photograph, a smile that isn't meant for you, a caption that pretends you don't exist, a vacation you paid for, without packing a single bag. That evening, I opened my laptop. My phone battery had long died, and I needed a bigger screen to process what my heart already knew. I went back to the photo, the one where they were sitting under a bamboo hut, drinks in hand, laughing like they were 20 again. The filters were heavy, their makeup perfect. But what I saw most clearly was how completely I was missing from it all. And then came the next post. It was a video montage, clips strung together, waves crashing, clinking glasses, slow-motion walks on the beach with Island in the Sun playing in the background, my daughters, my blood, spinning and posing and throwing their heads back with laughter. The words beneath it hit harder than the overdraft on my card. You can't pour from an empty cup. Sometimes you have to fill your soul first. I stared at the words for a long time. They were quoting self-help nonsense to justify theft. They were pretending they were healing, while they emptied me to do it. One comment read, "You girls deserve it. Live your life." Another, "Wish my mom was as chill as yours. Haha." I didn't feel chill. I felt like a fool. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. In one of the videos, a boomerang of them spinning around on the sand, my youngest daughter lifted her arm high to toss her hat. The inside of her wrist flashed toward the camera, and there it was, my signature. A small tattoo she got years ago, my handwriting from a note I once left in her lunchbox. "You are loved, Mom." I remember crying when she got it, told her it was the most meaningful thing anyone had ever done for me, that she carried my love with her forever. But in that moment, all I could see was a signature she used as a prop, not a tribute, not a bond, a flourish on a woman who no longer thought enough of her mother to say, "Happy birthday." I closed the laptop and pressed my forehead to the cool wood of the kitchen table. What had I done? Where had I gone wrong? I hadn't been a perfect mother. God knows I made mistakes, worked too much, forgave too easily, said yes when I should have said no, but I was there. Every spelling bee, every fever, every broken heart, I was the one who stayed. While their father chased younger women in midlife dreams, I was the one who kept the lights on and the mortgage paid. And now, I was just a wallet they could empty from 4,000 miles away. I stared at the pile of birthday cards stacked neatly in the drawer beside me, all the ones I'd saved over the years, crayon drawings, glitter stickers. "Mommy, you're my best friend. I love you more than ice cream." I used to believe those words were a promise, but now I wondered if they were just rehearsals for the manipulation that came later. I picked one up, a pink card from when they were teens. Inside was a photo of the three of us at the beach, not Hawaii, just Lake Erie. We were smiling, sandy, happy. There was nothing fancy about it, but I'd never felt richer than I did that day. I looked back at the screen. Another post had gone up, a boomerang of them popping champagne. Caption, "The best moments are the ones you don't owe anyone an explanation for." Except they did. They owed me 12,000 explanations, and one damn phone call. By now, the guilt I'd been carrying, the self-blame, the questions, the what did I do wrongs, were beginning to curdle. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was deliberate. They planned this, used me, and flaunted it like they were proud of their cunning. And maybe they thought I'd just take it, that I'd cry into my tea and move on, that I was too old, too soft, too irrelevant to do anything about it. But they forgot something. I didn't survive 70 years by being weak. I survived by learning, by adapting, by knowing when to be silent and when to strike. That night, I went to bed with my mind made up. Tomorrow, I'd do something I'd never done before. I'd stop being Mom and start being someone who demanded respect, even if it meant burning the last bridge they ever built. I didn't sleep much that night. The house was too quiet, the betrayal too loud. I kept replaying every recent visit, every smile that now felt fake, every "love you, Mom" that sounded rehearsed. They didn't break into my wallet, they didn't steal the physical card. No, they did something worse. They took it when I was watching. 3 weeks before my birthday, they both came over on a Sunday afternoon, said they missed me, said they wanted to help around the house. That should have been my first red flag, and they never offered unless they wanted something. But I let them in, made them tea. We even laughed about how dusty the old spice rack had gotten. At one point, my oldest said, "Hey, Mom, do you still pay that credit card bill online or by mail?" I remember blinking at her, a bit surprised by the question, but I answered honestly. Online, mostly. I've got it saved on the iPad. Why? "Oh, I was just thinking, I can show you how to schedule payments so you don't have to worry about forgetting them. You know, at your age..." I didn't even catch the dig at the time. I was just happy to see them, grateful for the help. Loneliness makes you forgive too fast. So I handed her the iPad, told her the password, didn't even look over her shoulder. My youngest wandered into the bedroom to fold laundry. Later that night, I noticed the drawer where I kept my old purse had been nudged slightly out of place. I thought maybe I'd just been careless, or maybe the cat had bumped it. But now, it was so obvious. They'd come in like sweet daughters, asking about payments and chores, all while memorizing card numbers and checking for limits. They planned this, together. And I gave them everything they needed. Willingly, blindly. I opened the drawer again that morning and pulled out the small leather notebook I kept in the back corner. Inside was a log, handwritten, of every major expense I'd covered for them over the years, not because I needed to track it, but because part of me always believed they'd want to repay me someday. 2014, down payment for C. Nicole's first car, $4,000, 2016. Emergency dental for Chloe's son, $1,500. 2018. Bailout for missed mortgage payment, $3,700. 2020. College tuition catch-up, $6,200. I never asked for a dime back. I never brought it up at birthdays or holidays, because I believed love meant giving. But now, I wasn't sure what it meant anymore. My hands trembled as I turned to the last page of that log. I added one more entry. 2025. Unauthorized luxury trip to Hawaii. $12,968. Paid with stolen credit card. Then I closed the notebook. And I cried. Not because of the money, but because of the moment I realized I didn't know my daughters anymore. Or maybe I never had. After breakfast, I walked to the closet and pulled out the photo album I hadn't opened in years. Inside were pages and pages of smiles. Nicole at her 5th birthday, face smeared with chocolate cake. Chloe in a Halloween princess dress, holding my hand so tight I thought I'd never let go. There were notes stuck between the pages. "Mommy, you're my sunshine. Thank you for loving me when I'm cranky. Promise we'll be best friends forever." I used to believe those little letters were sacred. Now they just look like souvenirs from a time that no longer existed. By noon, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit here and be a victim. Not at 70. Not on my birthday week. I called the credit card company back, told them I wanted to proceed, report it as theft, start the fraud process. The representative hesitated when I mentioned it was likely done by family. "Are you sure you want to do this, ma'am?" I paused, took a breath. Then I said, "Yes, because if they're old enough to commit fraud, they're old enough to face the consequences." Before hanging up, I asked one final question. If they used my card number for a flight, does that mean their names are on the reservation? There was a pause, some typing. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "It appears the tickets were purchased in their legal names. First class, round trip, departed on the 3rd. The 3rd, 3 days before my birthday. They left together with my money and didn't even bother to hide it." She continued, "If the report is filed, this will likely go to law enforcement." I smiled faintly. "Good," I whispered. "It's time someone else told them no for once." I hung up the phone and sat back. The wind outside rattled the windows, but inside I felt something settle. For the first time in years, I felt awake. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Just done. Done being the safety net they set fire to. Done being the silent bank they withdrew from. And I wasn't just going to freeze the card, I was going to thaw the truth. The first time I dialed, I told myself I was just calling to talk, not to accuse, not to fight, just to give them a chance to explain, to lie, to me gently maybe, to pretend they'd forgotten to call and everything else had been a misunderstanding. I still wanted to believe they were my girls. So I called Nicole first, 3 rings, then straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Nicole. I'm probably somewhere amazing right now. Leave a message." Of course she was somewhere amazing, on my dime. I hung up without leaving a message. Next, I tried Chloe. No answer. I waited. Called again. No voicemail this time. Just that cold, indifferent click at the end of the ring cycle. I stared at the screen for a long time, watched the seconds tick up like I was counting how many more times I'd let them get away with this. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the family group chat. It used to be full of recipes, updates on the grandkids, inside jokes. Lately, it had gone quiet. Mostly me sending happy birthday or how are you doing and being met with emojis or silence. I scrolled up. The last message I sent was 2 weeks ago. "Anyone coming over for Sunday dinner? I bought that peach pie you love." No reply. Now I typed a new message. My thumbs hovered, shaking slightly. I didn't want to sound bitter. I didn't want to beg. So I wrote, "I hope Hawaii is as beautiful as you dreamed. I wouldn't know, of course, since I'm spending my 70th birthday alone, and apparently funding yours." I hit send. Then I waited and waited. Nothing. 10 minutes later, I saw the little seen icon. Chloe had read it, but she didn't respond. Instead, a notification popped up. Instagram. Chloe had just posted a new photo. I opened the app. There they were again. Both of them now dressed in matching white dresses with flower crowns, standing barefoot on a beach at sunset. Their arms looped, their smiles dazzling. The caption, "No drama." Just vibes. I let out a bitter laugh. No drama? They'd stolen $12,000, abandoned me on my 70th birthday, and posted this? And then came the comments. "You girls are glowing. So jealous. You deserve this queen energy." I read through them all, feeling like someone standing outside their own life, watching strangers try on their clothes and walk through their memories. And just when I thought I'd seen enough, I saw it. One comment stood out from the rest. From Chloe's friend, a woman I barely knew but who once came over for Thanksgiving. She wrote, "Wait, how did y'all afford this trip? Weren't you both stressing about rent last month?" And Chloe's reply, "Shh, don't worry. Old people don't check statements." Old people. Old people. That wasn't a stranger mocking me. That was my daughter, mocking me, to her friends, after using my money, on my birthday. That was the moment the switch flipped. The grief stopped. The heartbreak paused. The mother in me. The one who baked birthday cakes and sat through school plays and covered. Bail payments. She stepped back, and someone else stepped forward. The woman who'd worked for 40 years. The woman who'd buried a cheating husband and kept going. The woman who'd saved every receipt, every late-night worry, every quiet insult. She rose. I stood up, pulled the old banker's box from the closet, and started gathering everything I needed. Statements, photos, screenshots, even copies of the birthday cards they never sent this year. Evidence, not for revenge, but for justice. Because if my daughters thought I was just some irrelevant old person who didn't check statements, they were about to learn exactly how sharp my memory still was, and how strong a mother can be, when she's no longer afraid of losing the children who already left her behind. Later that night, I called the bank one more time, told them to finalize the fraud report. The woman on the line hesitated. "Ma'am, just to confirm, you're saying the individuals responsible are your own daughters?" I paused, then said calmly, "No. I'm saying the individuals responsible are two adults who knew exactly what they were doing." There was silence on the other end, then a soft, "Understood." She gave me the case number. I wrote it down in my ledger, right next to every other sacrifice I'd made for them, and I underlined it twice, because this time, it wasn't going to disappear under guilt. The next morning, I opened every window in the house, let the cold air rush through. I needed to clear out more than the dust. I needed to breathe. And when I did, when I finally exhaled, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of what they'd say, not of losing them, not of being the bad guy. Because you cannot lose what already left you. And they left me long before Hawaii. This was just the invoice. I gathered my paperwork carefully. Every detail had to be perfect. The bank statements with charges circled in red pen, screenshots of their posts and comments, my original card agreement, a photo of the card itself, still tucked safely in my wallet, and a notarized log of the day I reported it to the bank. It felt like preparing for court, and maybe I was. Because this wasn't just about the stolen money, it was about proving I still had a voice, and I was done whispering. I called the local precinct and asked to speak with someone about filing a fraud report. The woman on the phone was polite but uncertain. "Do you know who used the card, ma'am?" "Yes. Are they strangers?" "No." Pause. "Family?" "Yes, my daughters." Another pause, then a soft, sympathetic breath. "Okay, ma'am, would you be willing to come down and file a formal report in person? This type of case can't be handled anonymously." "Good," I said. "I don't want to be anonymous anymore." I drove myself there, put on my navy sweater, the one with the embroidered collar, brushed my hair, pressed my slacks. If I was going to report my own children, I'd do it looking like the woman they forgot I am, dignified, unshaken, present. The officer at the desk was young, kind-eyed, and startled when I handed over the folder. He flipped through each page, slowly. Didn't interrupt, didn't question, just read. When he got to the screenshots, the ones with their comments mocking me, he looked up. "You have everything we'd need," he said softly. "This is well documented." I nodded. He added, "This will likely escalate to a criminal investigation. Are you sure you want to move forward?" "I'm not doing this out of anger," I said. "I'm doing this out of principle." They knew what they were doing, and I've spent my entire life teaching them right from wrong. It's time they learn what consequences feel like. He didn't argue. He just signed the intake sheet and handed me the case number. That evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of chamomile tea, the sunset melting into the trees like fire through molasses. The wind was cooler than the night before. The world felt lighter, not because anything had changed, but because I had. For the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt prepared. My phone buzzed again. A new Instagram post. I opened it, expecting more photos of beaches and cocktails. But this one was different. They were at the airport now, smiling in front of the boarding gate. Hashtag number sign, Mahalo Maui number sign, no regrets. No regrets? I sipped my tea and stared at the image for a long time. Then I whispered, "You'll regret it, soon enough." The next morning, the officer called me. "Ma'am," he said, "we've confirmed the names on the airline tickets. Both daughters. Full round trip. First class." "I know," I replied. He hesitated. "There's something else. The resort has surveillance footage of them checking in using your card." Of course they did. We'll be coordinating with airport security to flag them upon return. I didn't flinch. Let me know if you need a written statement, I said. We might, he answered. This isn't something we see often. You don't see mothers turning in their children? I asked. No, ma'am. We see mothers protecting them, even when they shouldn't. I smiled faintly. Maybe it's time we stop calling it protection and start calling it enabling. That night, I slept through the night for the first time in a week. No dreams, no guilt, no second guessing, just peace. Because when you stop chasing their love and start protecting your dignity, that's when the healing begins. It was a Thursday afternoon when the phone rang. I was folding towels, the small, neat kind I always kept in the guest bathroom, the ones Nicole once said were too hotel-like, and Chloe called old-fashioned. I liked them precisely for that reason. I almost didn't answer. I thought it might be another scam call, or worse, someone from the church committee asking me to volunteer again. But when I picked up, the voice on the other end was calm, direct. Is this Mrs. Geraldine M.? Yes. This is Officer Sanderson with the County Financial Crimes Division. I'm calling regarding the credit card fraud case you filed earlier this week. Do you have a moment to speak? I sat down on the edge of the bed, towel still in hand. Yes, of course. He explained that their team had reviewed the documents, verified the card ownership, confirmed the transaction locations, and matched them with the social media timestamps I'd provided. The level of documentation you submitted, he said, was unusually thorough. We typically don't see this kind of clarity in personal cases. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or just polite surprise. He continued, We've contacted the hotel and resort. They have video surveillance. Both individuals you identified used your card at check-in and again during spa services. They presented themselves as authorized users. They're not, I said. We know. The resort has their IDs on file. He paused then, like he was giving me a moment to prepare. We're preparing to notify local authorities at the airport. Your daughter's return flight is booked for Sunday. Upon arrival, they'll likely be met by officers for questioning and a potential detainment depending on cooperation. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. Mrs. M. We understand this situation is highly personal. We've seen a few of these kinds of cases. Not many, but enough to know they're complicated. They're not, I said, more firmly than I intended. It's not complicated. It's just painful. He was quiet for a beat, then added gently, Are you aware this could result in misdemeanor or felony charges? Depending on the value, it might cross into felony territory. I am aware. And you still wish to proceed? I stood up and walked to the window. The wind had blown my porch chimes into motion, soft, steady sounds that didn't match the moment. Yes, I said, because if I don't do this now, I'll be spending the rest of my life wondering what else they'll take. He didn't argue. After we ended the call, I sat back down and stared at my hands. These were hands that once cut the crusts off their sandwiches, that buttoned their coats, braided their hair, zipped their prom dresses. Now these same hands had written a statement to the police, filed documents, closed the door on decades of motherhood. I didn't cry, because somewhere between betrayal and silence, I had already grieved the daughters I used to know. That evening, my neighbor Linda came by with banana bread. She said she hadn't seen the girls in a while and asked if I was doing anything special for my birthday, now that it had passed. I told her, no, but the girls went on a trip. She smiled. Oh, that's nice. Family getaway? I paused, then gave her the kind of answer you give when the truth is too long for a porch chat. Number just the girls. She frowned. Did they forget your birthday? I shrugged. They remembered, just not in the way you'd think. Linda looked concerned, but I changed the subject quickly, offered her a slice of pie I hadn't touched since Sunday. She sat and chatted while I nodded along, but inside, all I could think about was Sunday, the day they'd land, the day they'd walk off that plane, into consequences they didn't think could reach them. That night, I pulled out the quilt from the top shelf of the linen closet, the one I started stitching after Harold died. I hadn't worked on it in years. As I threaded the needle, my fingers steadier than I expected, I realized something strange. I wasn't doing this to pass the time. I was doing it to remind myself of who I still was. Someone who made things, who kept things warm, who built a life with her own 2 hands and could rebuild again, even if she had to do it without them. The next morning, I placed the case number on the fridge, right next to the magnet that said, "Don't mistake kindness for weakness," because when they returned, when they saw police instead of a mother waiting at baggage claim, they'd realize the trip they took without asking wasn't free. It came with a toll, and now it was time to pay it. Sunday arrived like any other day. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, coffee brewed on the stove, birds pecked at the feeder outside. But in my chest, it didn't feel like just another day. It felt like Judgment Day. At exactly 9:42 a.m., I received a call. Unknown number. I answered, my voice calm. "Hello? This is Officer Sanderson. Just wanted to let you know. They've landed. Local law enforcement is on standby at the airport. We'll notify you once the situation is concluded." "Thank you," I said and hung up. I set my coffee down, sat very still, and I waited. Somewhere across town, I imagined the scene as it unfolded in real time. The automatic doors sliding open, Nicole and Chloe stepping off the plane, sun-kissed and smug, dragging designer suitcases that didn't belong to their budgets, laughing, yawning, probably texting their friends about the unreal vacation. I imagined them strolling toward the terminal exit, expecting a rideshare or maybe even a family member waiting. But what they got were 2 uniformed officers with a printed photo and a clipboard. Nicole M., Chloe M., confusion, defensiveness, then dawning realization. "We just got back from vacation. What's this about?" And then the words they never imagined hearing in their own lives. "We need you to come with us to answer questions about credit card fraud. The victim has filed a formal complaint. We have supporting evidence. Your names and faces are documented across multiple unauthorized transactions." I didn't know the exact details of how it went down. I didn't have video footage, but I saw enough. Because 20 minutes later, my neighbor Linda texted me a screenshot. It was from a local news alert. 2 women detained at Metro Airport for alleged theft via family member's credit card. Investigation ongoing. The photo was blurry, but it was them. Nicole in her white linen pants, Chloe in her turquoise wrap dress, standing beside their suitcases, faces tight with disbelief, hands mid-gesture as they tried to explain. In the background, 2 officers, calm and unmoved. It didn't look violent. It looked embarrassing, public, real. And for the first time, maybe they understood what it felt like to be seen for who they really were. The doorbell rang later that day. I opened it expecting the mail. Instead, it was Linda, holding her phone. "Geraldine," she whispered, "is this about your daughters?" I nodded. Her mouth dropped open. "You reported them?" "I did," I said simply. She didn't know what to say. I didn't either, so I just added, "It wasn't revenge. It was reality." That night, I sat by the fire with a blanket over my legs. I didn't watch TV. I didn't scroll through my phone. I just listened to the silence of a house no longer filled with guilt, to the sound of consequences miles away, finally catching up to where they belonged. And as the wind rustled through the trees, I thought about what they must have felt when those cold handcuffs brushed their wrists. Fear? Shame? Or just disbelief that their mother, the woman who once forgave everything, had finally said enough. The next morning, the police officer called again. They were processed and released under supervision. No bail required since it's a financial crime and they're first-time offenders. But we have court dates, and they've been instructed not to contact you unless through legal counsel." "I understand," I replied. He paused. They looked shocked. I let out a small, bitter breath. They thought they were invincible. "Most do," he said, then quietly added, "But you did the right thing, not just legally, as a person." I spent the rest of the afternoon writing a letter, not to them, to myself. It began, "Dear Jerry, this is what strength looks like." Because sometimes you don't get the apology. Sometimes you write yourself the closure. As for them, they didn't post again. No more selfies, no more vibes. The comments stopped. The beach photos disappeared. Their online lives went quiet. And that silence? That was the loudest confession of all. It came 3 days later, folded in half, stuffed in a plain white envelope with no return address. But I recognized the handwriting immediately. Slanted, loopy, a little rushed. Nicole always wrote like she was running out of time. For a moment, I just stared at it. Not angry, not excited, just still. Then I opened it. The paper inside was wrinkled, written in blue ink. The first line wasn't "Dear Mom," it was, "I don't even know if you'll read this, but I had to try." I kept reading. I don't know what to say except, "I'm sorry, not just for Hawaii, not just for the money, but for everything we didn't say, everything we didn't do." I paused there, because part of me had waited decades to hear those words, but another part of me, the older, wiser part, knew they came now only because consequences arrived first. She went on, "We thought it was just money, that you'd be mad for a little while, that we could talk our way out of it like we always did. But seeing those officers at the gate, seeing our names in that report, it broke something in us, and maybe it needed to break." I folded the letter in half, then opened it again. I needed to keep reading. Not for her, but for me. "We were selfish. We thought being your daughters gave us some kind of immunity, that you'd always be there to clean up what we messed up. You always were, even when you shouldn't have been. You don't owe us anything, Mom, and honestly, we don't deserve anything from you right now." I sat back in my chair, blinking slowly. The fire had long burned out in the hearth, but her words, they stirred embers I didn't know were still glowing. I turned the page over. Chloe had added a short note in different handwriting. I thought if I smiled enough, posted enough, pretended enough, I wouldn't feel guilty. But I do. "We miss you. I miss you." There was no ask, no manipulation, no request for forgiveness, just quiet, exposed regret. And for the first time in a long time, I believed them. Not because they wrote it, but because they didn't ask for anything in return. I placed the letter back in the envelope, walked to the drawer where I kept old birthday cards and recipes I didn't use anymore. I tucked it between a grocery list and an unfinished Christmas card they never mailed me 2 years ago. I didn't cry, but I didn't smile either. I just sat there and let the silence wrap around me, not like punishment, but like peace. The next day, I received a letter from the district attorney's office. The charges were moving forward. Due to the amount, over $10,000, the case qualified as a felony. But they were proposing a deal: reduced charges, mandatory restitution, and 6 months of financial counseling under court supervision. The decision was mine to support or decline. I held the letter in my hand for a long time. It was tempting to punish them fully, to let the hammer fall and make it loud. But I didn't need noise. I needed closure. So I called the DA and said, "Let's move forward with the deal. Let them earn their way out of this." And if they didn't, then they'd live with the stain they painted themselves. That night, I pulled out the quilt again, stitched one more square. It was deep green, the color of eucalyptus, the color of letting go, because forgiveness doesn't mean re-entry. It doesn't mean forgetting. Sometimes forgiveness just means freedom. I made myself a cup of peppermint tea, looked out at the moon spilling silver light onto the garden, and I whispered something I hadn't dared say out loud until that moment. I love them, but I love me more now. And that made all the difference. The courthouse smelled like lemon polish and old air. It was colder than I expected, like justice didn't need warmth to do its job. I sat in the waiting room with my hands folded in my lap, purse tucked under my arm. I had dressed carefully, navy wool coat, sensible flats, a brooch I hadn't worn since Harold's funeral. I wanted to look like a woman who was not afraid to sit at that table, a woman who remembered everything, a woman they'd underestimated for far too long. The district attorney was younger than I'd imagined, 40s, maybe. Her tone was professional, but there was a softness behind it, the kind that comes from dealing with families torn in two. She glanced over the file, nodded once, and said, "You've been incredibly thorough. Honestly, you saved us weeks of work. I appreciate that." I gave a small smile but said nothing. She continued, "As you probably know, we're moving forward with a deferred adjudication offer. First-time offenders, full restitution, no jail time if they comply with all terms." "And if they don't comply?" I asked quietly. "Then they serve a suspended sentence, 1 year minimum." I nodded. "That's fair." Then she closed the folder and leaned forward just slightly. "Off the record," she said gently, "can I ask why you pursued this?" I looked at her, steady, then said, "Because I spent my whole life teaching them right from wrong. I didn't raise criminals, and I won't die pretending I did." She tilted her head, almost in respect. "That takes strength." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "No," I said, "it takes love, the kind that finally learned how to say no." She explained what would happen next. The girls would be required to pay every cent back, in monthly installments tracked by the court. They'd attend court-ordered financial literacy classes, complete community service, and be restricted from using any credit cards for 1 year without a cosigner. They'd also be prohibited from contacting me without written consent. When she asked if I'd be willing to consider future mediation, I paused. "I'm not closing the door," I said, "but I'm not holding it open either." She nodded. "We'll let their behavior decide," she said. "Exactly." As I left the courthouse, I walked past a family in the lobby, a mother and daughter arguing softly about something. The daughter was maybe 20, rolling her eyes, her arms crossed. The mother looked tired. I didn't eavesdrop. I didn't need to. I knew that look. I'd worn it for years. The face of a woman asking to be seen and being met with indifference. When I got back home, the sun had dipped behind the pines. The porch light flickered on as I unlocked the door, and waiting on the mat was a package. No return address. I brought it in, opened the box. Inside, 2 small envelopes. One had a note that read, "We know this doesn't fix anything, but we wanted you to have it back." Inside the envelope was the necklace, the one Nicole wore in those beach photos, and the other envelope held a single Polaroid. Me, Chloe, and Nicole, from years ago, on the front steps, with birthday hats on. I was holding a cake. I remembered that day. They'd made the cake themselves. It had tilted in the oven, and we'd laughed so hard we couldn't breathe. I didn't cry, but I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but relief, that maybe they were beginning to understand. I placed the necklace back in my drawer, not as a keepsake, but as a line in the sand. They could return things. They could return words. But only time would tell if they'd return as better women. That night, I wrote down 3 rules in my notebook. 1. Love doesn't mean access. 2. Forgiveness doesn't mean permission. 3. Motherhood doesn't mean martyrdom. Then I underlined each one twice, because I wasn't just building a wall around my heart. I was building a boundary around my future, and I intended to keep it standing. It took me a full week after the courthouse visit to realize something that should have been obvious. I hadn't celebrated my birthday. Not truly. I had marked it, sure. With silence and betrayal, with legal reports and cold breakfasts, but I hadn't honored it. Not the way a 70-year-old woman who survived 2 children, 1 failed marriage, a mortgage, menopause, and Medicare paperwork should be honored. So I decided to give myself a birthday, one no one else could take or forget. No candles, no forced phone calls, just me and the life I'd spent 7 decades building. I booked a weekend at a quiet inn 2 towns over. Not far, just far enough that the roads changed and my memories didn't follow. It sat on the edge of a lake, with rocking chairs on every porch and white curtains that caught the light like sails. When I checked in, the woman at the desk said, "Will you be needing 1 key or 2?" I smiled. "Just 1. And no one's meeting me." She grinned. "Sounds perfect." And it was. The first morning, I woke up without an alarm, opened the curtains, sat in silence with a cup of tea and a view of the water. I didn't check my phone, didn't open the news, didn't scroll through social media to see who was pretending their life was perfect. I didn't need to measure my peace against anyone else's chaos. For once, it was enough to feel the sun on my face and know that it was mine. I went to the spa, not the kind my daughters flaunted online, no champagne fountains or filtered photos, just warm hands, soft music, and a massage therapist who said, "You have tension in your shoulders, a lot of it." "I know," I said, smiling, "but less than I had last month." She didn't ask. She didn't need to. She just pressed gently into the knots life had left behind. And I let go. That evening, I walked to a little cafe by the water, ordered grilled trout and lemon risotto, a glass of wine I couldn't pronounce, and when the waitress asked if I'd like dessert, I said, "Yes, something with chocolate, and 1 candle if you've got it." She smiled, came back 10 minutes later with a small chocolate torte, a flickering candle in the center. "I hope this is okay?" she asked. I looked at her, a stranger who didn't know my story, didn't know my name, and said, "It's perfect." I lit the candle, held my breath, and then I made a wish, not for them to change, not for time to rewind, just for peace, a steady, unshakable kind of peace. Then I blew it out. Later that night, I took a walk down the gravel path beside the lake. The moon stretched across the water like silver ribbon. I passed couples holding hands, teenagers with earbuds, even a mother pushing a stroller. They didn't notice me, and I didn't need them to. For the first time, invisibility didn't feel like punishment. It felt like freedom. Back in my room, I sat on the porch rocker and opened my journal. I wrote, "Happy birthday, Jerry. You made it. You are not what they took. You are what you kept. You are what you rebuilt." Then I underlined the last line 3 times, because sometimes the most powerful celebration is the one you give yourself after others forget you existed. The next morning, I checked out with no fanfare. The front desk clerk said, "We hope you'll come again." "I think I will," I said, "but not for a birthday, just for me." He handed me a wrapped muffin. "It's still warm." That small gesture, quiet, thoughtful, free of obligation, felt more like love than any of the grand gestures I'd waited for from my own daughters. As I pulled into my driveway later that day, I looked at my little home with new eyes. It wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. It wasn't quiet. It was mine. And inside that house lived a woman who had stopped shrinking herself to fit inside other people's needs. A woman who had walked through the fire of motherhood and come out holding her own hand. Because in the end, the birthday I gave myself was the first one I ever truly celebrated. Not for who they said I was, but for who I decided to become. It was nearly 2 weeks after their return before they finally showed up. I had just finished watering the ferns by the window when I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Not hurried, not chaotic, just hesitant. I peeked through the blinds. It was them, Nicole was driving, her hands locked at 10 and 2 like she was gripping control too tightly. Chloe sat in the passenger seat, hair pulled back, face unreadable. For a moment, I stood there and just watched. Part of me expected them to get out laughing, to pretend nothing had happened, but they didn't. They sat there for a full minute, not moving. Then finally, doors opened. Gravel crunched. Footsteps came up the walk. And then, a knock. Not like before. This one was soft, slow, careful. I opened the door. They stood side by side like schoolgirls called into the principal's office. Except this time, the principal was their mother. And the punishment had already been delivered. They looked older, not just from the sunburn or exhaustion, but from shame, the kind that doesn't wash off. Nicole spoke first. "Hi, Mom." I said nothing. Chloe added, We didn't want to just text." I raised one eyebrow. "That's new." Nicole flinched but nodded. "We deserved that." I crossed my arms. "Why are you here?" She swallowed hard. "Not to ask for anything." "Good," I said. Chloe stepped forward slightly. "We wanted to say it in person. We're sorry. For everything, not just Hawaii, for all the ways we took you for granted." They looked at me like children hoping for absolution. But I wasn't a priest. I was a woman who had learned how to survive without them. I stepped aside. 5 minutes, I said. That's all I have. They entered the house slowly, as if expecting it to feel different. And maybe it did, because it wasn't their playground anymore. It wasn't their safety net. It was a home with walls that had learned how to say enough. We sat in the living room, them on the couch, me in my armchair. They stared at their hands. Chloe spoke first. "I didn't know how far we'd fallen until I saw our names in that file, until I saw your handwriting in the statement." Nicole added, "You didn't raise us to do what we did, but we did it anyway." I nodded. "Yes, you did." There was a long silence. Then Chloe whispered, "Are we ever going to be okay again?" I looked at them, really looked. 2 women I once carried through fever dreams and scraped knees. 2 women who grew up believing their mother would always catch them. And maybe that was the problem. "I don't know," I said. "That's not a question I can answer for you, but I can tell you this. You taught me something." They looked up. "You taught me that love, without boundaries, becomes fuel for entitlement. You taught me that forgiveness without change is just permission." They both blinked back tears. I stood up and walked to the fireplace mantel, picked up the old photo of us on Chloe's 5th birthday. Cake smeared across her face, Nicole holding her hand, me in the middle, smiling like nothing could ever break us. I held it up. "This," I said. "This. Woman here, she gave everything, even when she had nothing left." I set it down gently. "She's gone." They sat in silence, letting that sink in. "But the woman standing here now," I continued, "she's not bitter. She's not broken. She's just done being used." I walked back to my chair and sat down. "If you want to earn your place in my life again, that's on you. It won't be through apologies. It'll be through consistency, through respect, through remembering that I am a person, not just your mother." Nicole nodded slowly, tears now slipping down her cheeks. Chloe bit her lip and looked away. I added, "You don't get to skip the work because you share my blood." Then I glanced at the clock. "Your 5 minutes are up." They stood slowly. Nicole whispered, "We'll do better." Chloe added, "If you ever want company, we'll wait for the invitation." I didn't respond. They walked to the door. Before stepping out, Nicole turned and said, "Thank you for not turning us into strangers forever." I gave her a long look. "I didn't," I said. "You did." Then I closed the door, gently, not in anger, but in peace. I stood there in the quiet afterward, hand still on the knob, and for the first time in a long time, I felt taller. Not because I'd won, but because I'd chosen myself. The house is quiet again, not the kind of quiet that stings, not the hollow, painful kind I felt on my birthday, when silence was another word for abandonment. This silence is different. It's earned. It's peaceful. It's mine. Since they left, I haven't heard from them. No texts, no emails, no surprise cards or doorbell flowers. And I haven't reached out either, not because I'm angry, but because I finally understood something no parenting book ever taught me. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop rescuing the people who expect you to. I sit on the porch most mornings now, rocking slowly with a warm cup of tea, listening to the birds argue in the hedges. The court case is moving along as expected. Restitution payments have begun. Small automatic deposits into my account every month with sterile little notes like repayment installment 3/24. They come on time. No apologies attached, no explanations needed, and that's how I prefer it. Because I'm not interested in "I'm sorry" anymore. I'm interested in behavior. I've also started doing something I never made time for before, journaling. Not about them, but about me, my memories, my regrets, my quiet victories, what I survived, what I gave, what I reclaimed. It's funny how motherhood trains you to write everyone else's story but your own. Now, I write mine first, and I've begun to see myself not just as a mother or a widow or a woman of a certain age, but as a person who still matters, even without an audience. A few days ago, I hosted a small lunch on the patio for a couple women from my quilting circle. Women like me, with silver hair and soft-spoken stories, and children who don't call as much as they used to. One of them, Marion, asked me if I'd forgiven the girls. I took a long sip of lemonade before answering. Forgiveness isn't a light switch, I told her. It's a door I keep locked until I see someone outside it, building a new key. She nodded. I think I'm still waiting for mine, she said quietly. I squeezed her hand. Don't rush it. Let them earn it. And maybe they will. Someday. But they'll do it from the outside. With clean hands. With eyes that see me fully. Not just as someone to use or tolerate or post about when it's convenient. They'll see me as a woman who stopped begging to matter. The photo from Chloe's 5th birthday still sits on my mantle, not because I'm clinging to the past, but because I've made peace with it. That version of us, the smiles, the frosting, the chaos, it was real, but it was also unfinished. Now, I don't need a new photo to replace it. I just need space between it and everything that came after. I also wrote one final line in my journal this morning, a truth I didn't know how to say until now. I didn't lose them. I just found myself. Because love isn't supposed to erase you. It's supposed to include you. And if it doesn't, it's not love. It's leverage. As for my legacy, it's no longer defined by what I gave away. It's defined by what I refused to surrender. My dignity, my name, my worth, my silence. So if anyone ever asks, how did you spend your 70th birthday? I'll smile and say, they took my card to Hawaii. I gave myself peace in return. One of us came back with wisdom. The other two came back with court dates. And I'll laugh, not cruelly, but with the kind of laughter that says, I may be old, but I'm not a fool, not anymore. Then I'll close the journal, place it on the shelf beside the quilt I finished stitching, the one I made square by square in the weeks after they forgot me. And I'll sit on that porch one more time, letting the breeze lift my hair, feeling the light kiss my shoulders, knowing this is the legacy I chose, not what they did, but what I did after.